Mark Ellis had always been the kind of man who arrived early and stayed late. For over 3 decades, his name had been quietly stitched into the fabric of Hydrolex systems, the kind of employee who didn't chase praise but earned respect through consistency. But on that cold March morning, something felt off the moment he turned into the company lot. The usual hum of his badge against the scanner was silent. The light didn't flash green. It blinked red. He tried again. Slower this time. Still red. The young security guard inside the booth, Tyler, or maybe Taylor, stepped out, shifting uncomfortably in his oversized jacket. His eyes darted between Mark and the console. "I'm really sorry, sir," he mumbled. "They didn't tell me anything. Your badge isn't coming up on the list anymore. You might want to check your email." Mark said nothing. He just stood there for a moment, one hand gripping the badge as if holding it tighter might will it back to life. 32 years. No meeting. No phone call. Just red. Back in his car, he sat in silence. His hands were steady, but his chest felt hollow, as if someone had quietly scooped something out while he wasn't looking. He didn't drive home right away. Instead, he took the long way, the scenic loop past the old warehouse he helped retrofit in '97, the side street where he once walked with his daughter after bringing her to take your kid to work day. That had been back when Hydrolex was still a mid-sized dream and not the sprawling, sanitized machine it had become. By the time he pulled into his driveway, the sun was climbing higher, and the edge in his gut had turned into something colder. He opened his laptop. There it was. Subject: Transition notification, immediate action required. From People and Culture. Time: 6:13 a.m. He opened it. Dear Mr. Ellis. As part of our ongoing strategic realignment and departmental consolidation, your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. Please refer to the attached checklist for next steps, including equipment return and exit protocol. We thank you for your contributions to Hydrolex systems. There was no personal touch. No mention of his years of service, the late nights, the patents he'd helped draft, or the crises he'd navigated. Just a checklist. Mark stared at the screen for a long time. The cursor blinked in the corner like it was mocking him. He didn't reply. Didn't forward it to anyone. He closed the lid. Walked to the garage. Turned on the light. It was a sacred place, his own domain. A space filled with neatly labeled drawers, salvaged circuit boards, half-finished hobby projects he'd promised himself he'd get back to. The air smelled like old wires and oiled metal. Familiar. Grounding. He sat down at the bench, hands resting on the cool wood. Then he saw it. An old black external hard drive, tucked between 2 stacks of workshop manuals. He'd almost forgotten about it. The last time he'd used it was months ago, maybe longer. Back when he still believed someone up top would listen. Back when he noticed those first discrepancies in the field run data. He had flagged them quietly. Water flow sensors reporting efficiency that didn't match system wear. Chemical levels fluctuating, but never triggering alerts. He'd filed a report. A short, respectful one. Just enough to raise a flag without raising suspicion. He never heard back. Days later, the project was pulled from him. Weeks later, so was his job. He picked up the drive. Held it in both hands. And remembered something his father once told him when he was young and stubborn, convinced that no one saw his work. The world doesn't always clap for the quiet ones, son. But the quiet ones, they keep the walls standing. Mark hadn't been looking for a fight. He wasn't the type. But silence, this kind of silence, it wasn't peace. It was permission. Permission to erase, to bury, to pretend nothing had ever been wrong. He plugged in the hard drive. The hum was faint, but steady. He opened the first file, system logs, field run, raw input. The numbers were all there. And they didn't lie. Unlike people. Later that night, Mark sat at his kitchen table, eating cold soup out of a chipped ceramic bowl. The lights were dim. The house, quiet. Too quiet. On the refrigerator was a picture his daughter had sent him, her son, Mark's grandson, standing in a little stream behind their house, holding up a toy boat like he'd conquered the sea. Mark looked at it for a long time. That stream was downstream from the very plant whose data he had flagged. What if? No. He didn't know for sure. But now he had to. Not just for himself. But for them. He opened his contact list. Scrolled down. Paused at a name, Priya Patel. He hadn't spoken to her in 5 years. She'd left Hydrolex under a cloud. Said too much in a meeting. Asked too many questions. Got labeled difficult and was gone by the end of the quarter. He remembered how angry she'd been. How scared, too. He clicked call. 1 ring. 2. Then her voice, Priya speaking. Hey. It's Mark Ellis. A pause. Static on the line. Mark? Yeah. Is everything okay? Mark glanced at the hard drive still blinking on the table. No, he said. But I think I'm finally ready to talk. Priya agreed to meet the next day. They chose a quiet diner off Route 14, one of those places that hadn't updated its wallpaper since the early 90s. It was safe, unremarkable. The kind of place where no one asked questions and the coffee was always just hot enough. When Priya walked in, Mark stood instinctively. She looked older, of course, but in the kind of way experience shows on someone's face. Sharper. Wiser. She wore no makeup, just a calm, assessing expression that softened only slightly when she saw him. You look tired, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. I am, Mark admitted. She didn't ask for small talk. She reached for the manila envelope he'd brought and opened it without ceremony. The printouts were dense, lines of code and data overlays, but she read them like a second language. Same override pattern as before, she murmured. They're still suppressing peak-level readings. And look at this, there's a firmware patch timestamped exactly 4 hours after your report was filed. They didn't ignore you. They covered it up. Mark watched her quietly. You were right, Priya. Back then. I should have listened more carefully. You did, she said. Just too late. A waitress interrupted with refills they hadn't asked for. When she left, Priya leaned in. I work with an environmental watchdog group now. We handle whistleblower reports, help push them through the legal system without compromising identities. But I'll be honest with you, once this starts, it doesn't stop. You ready for that? Mark didn't answer right away. He stared out the window, watching cars roll by in the gray morning light. I spent 32 years building a company I thought stood for something. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, someone else would say what needed saying. But now, I think that someone is me. Priya nodded slowly. We'll need more than logs. You have backups? Communications? Anything that proves the company knew and acted to suppress the truth? Mark nodded. Everything's backed up. Emails, project notes, internal documentation. I never deleted anything. Just didn't know what to do with it until now. They agreed to move forward. That night, Mark turned his garage into a war room. He pulled out labeled folders, restored archived backups, and began organizing everything chronologically. 30 years of engineering left a man with habits, detailed notes, system schematics, and more importantly, memory. He remembered the meetings. The faces. The silence in rooms that should have demanded answers. He began to write a timeline. Not just of data, but of people. Who approved what? Who ignored what? Who quietly disappeared after asking the wrong questions? Meanwhile, Priya's team built a secure Dropbox for confidential submissions. They would act as the buffer, collecting, verifying, protecting. Mark wasn't naive. He knew the risk. And the company seemed to know he wasn't going away quietly. 2 days after he uploaded the first set of files, a black SUV parked across the street from his house. No plates. Windows tinted darker than legal. It didn't move for over an hour. Then it was gone. The next day, his former direct supervisor, Craig McIntyre, called from a blocked number. "Hey Mark," the voice said, falsely upbeat. "Just wanted to check in. I know this transition's been unexpected. We'd love to conduct an exit survey with you, if you're open to it." Mark's jaw tightened. He didn't answer right away. "Craig, are you calling as a friend or as a company rep?" A short pause. "I just want to help make sense of things," Craig offered. Mark stared at the phone in silence. "I think you already made sense of things, Craig," he said, and ended the call. That evening, Mark received an email from an internal address he didn't recognize. No greeting. No signature. Just 5 words. "This is bigger than you." He closed the email, made 3 encrypted backups of all files, and dropped another hard copy at Priya's office the next morning. There was no turning back now. A week passed. Then 2. Mark waited. He kept working, kept compiling. But doubt crept in like rust on a steel beam. Quiet. Corrosive. He wondered if it would even matter. If anyone would care. If they would just bury it, like they always did. Then, one afternoon, his phone buzzed. It was Priya. Her voice was low, but electric. "The first article goes live tomorrow," she said. "We've got a journalist from the Herald." They verified the data. Legal gave the green light. Mark didn't speak for a long moment. "What's the headline?" Priya hesitated. Then she read it aloud. "Tainted Truth, Former Hydrolex Engineer Leaks Data Showing Environmental Violations at Regional Water Plants." Mark closed his eyes. He had been waiting for this moment. But now that it was here, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing on the edge of something vast. Unknown. Inevitable. "Are you ready for this?" Priya asked. Mark looked toward the photo of his grandson, taped on the corner of his monitor. "I wasn't," he said. "But now. I don't think I have a choice." The article went live on a Monday morning. It started quietly, an investigative piece buried mid-page on the Herald's digital platform. But the headline was sharp, and the evidence undeniable. "Tainted Truth, Leaked Documents Reveal Environmental Violations at Hydrolex Regional Sites." By noon, the story was picked up by 3 national outlets. By Tuesday, the EPA released a statement confirming an active investigation into Hydrolex systems. Mark read none of it live. He had no appetite for headlines. Instead, he sat in his garage, drinking coffee that had long gone cold, surrounded by empty file folders and sticky notes that had finally served their purpose. He didn't want attention. He wanted accountability. And for the first time in months, it didn't feel impossible. The backlash came faster than anyone expected. A former Hydrolex field tech stepped forward under whistleblower protection, confirming that internal protocols had been bypassed, intentionally and repeatedly. 3 smaller water boards suspended contracts. Shareholders demanded answers. A city council in Michigan filed a motion for civil damages related to one of the flagged treatment plants. Then came the press conference. The CEO of Hydrolex, Malcolm Keane, appeared under the harsh lights of a gray, over-air-conditioned room. He wore the calm expression of a man trained in public relations, not accountability. "We are deeply concerned about the allegations," he read from a prepared statement. "If there were failings, we will address them. Our mission has always been to deliver clean water and transparency to the communities we serve." He didn't take questions. Behind him stood Craig McIntyre, the same man who'd once called Mark to suggest an exit survey. His tie was crooked. His eyes looked flat. Mark watched the clip on his laptop in silence. He didn't feel triumph. Just a grim kind of clarity. The walls were starting to crack. 3 weeks later, Priya called. She sounded different, exhausted, but sharper. "They're unraveling," she said. "The compliance director resigned yesterday. Internal emails were subpoenaed. 2 plants shut down for audit. And we just got confirmation that the CEO's being called before a congressional subcommittee." Mark didn't respond right away. He looked around his garage, at the empty pegboard where his old employee badge used to hang. "I didn't want it to go this far," he said finally. "I just wanted them to stop pretending." Priya was quiet for a long time. They needed someone who couldn't be bought. Someone with nothing left to lose. Mark leaned back, listening to the soft hum of his space heater. "I still had something to lose," he said. "What's that?" "My name." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That night, Mark received a letter by mail. Real mail. Stamped. Folded. It was from a mother in a small town near the field run site. "Dear Mr. Ellis. My daughter's had skin rashes for the past year. We couldn't figure out what was wrong. Now we know. Thank you for speaking when no one else would. You may have saved my child's life." Mark read it 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and slipped it inside the back cover of his notebook, right next to the letter from the intern. He stared at the two together. The beginning. And the consequence. Weeks passed. Hydrolex spiraled further. Congress held hearings. Journalists swarmed. One of the senior VPs was indicted on charges of evidence tampering and reckless endangerment. The company's reputation, once pristine, was now radioactive. Mark stayed out of the spotlight. He turned down every interview. Every podcast. Every camera crew that asked to film him at his home. Instead, he accepted an offer from the local community college to teach part-time. The course was called Ethics and Accountability in Systems Design. He didn't teach from textbooks. He taught from memory. In the final class of the semester, a student raised her hand. "Mr. Ellis," she said, "do you think what you did actually changed anything? I mean, the system's still broken, right?" Mark considered his answer carefully. "No," he said. "I didn't fix the system. I just made it harder for them to hide the cracks." A quiet pause followed. Then he added, "And sometimes, that's how it starts." After class, as students filed out, a young man stayed behind. He hesitated at the door. "My dad used to work at Hydrolex," he said softly. "He was laid off during the last round. He always thought no one noticed what was happening. I think he would have been proud of what you did." Mark nodded, his voice caught somewhere behind his ribs. "Tell him he wasn't invisible." Outside, the air was cool. Crisp. Clean. Mark walked to his truck slowly, breathing it in. In the distance, he could hear the sound of water running from the creek nearby. The same creek that, not long ago, carried something far more dangerous than anyone knew. He smiled faintly, not with pride, but with peace. They had tried to silence him. But the silence had a cost. And now, the world was listening. He didn't need a monument. He just needed to know that the truth had somewhere to flow. Mark's story reminds us that truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it hums quietly inside a dusty hard drive, waiting for someone brave enough to plug it in. If you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, or discarded after years of hard work, let this story remind you. You are not done. Your voice still matters. And silence can be louder than fire. Comment below, what part of Mark's journey moved you most? Type 2 if you loved it, or 7 if it challenged your view. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to EN True Tales, where Natalie brings you powerful news stories every single day. Your story might be next.